It's Friday night. The lights of New York City burn like liquid gold. Somewhere, a record spins. Just got paid. It's Friday night. The bass drops, and the dance floor explodes. In 1988, that voice, smooth, soulful, unstoppable, belonged to Johnny Kemp, the Bahamian kid who turned a weekend anthem into an entire generation's heartbeat. People didn't just hear that song, they lived it. Paychecks cashed, hair done, mirrors fogged with cologne. Johnny's voice was the soundtrack of joy, the rhythm of freedom after 5 long days of struggle. But what the world didn't know is that decades later, that same voice would be found silent, floating face down in the waters of Montego Bay, Jamaica. How does a man who made the world dance die alone, far from home, the night before he was set to perform again? They called it an accident, a fall, a slip on the rocks. But those who knew him say the story never quite added up. Tonight, we return to the beat, the brilliance, and the mystery of the man who gave us the weekend and lost everything before sunrise. This is the story of Johnny Kemp, the man who got paid, and paid the ultimate price. Before the bright lights, before the fame, before the song that made the world dance, there was a boy from the islands. Johnny Kemp was born in Nassau, Bahamas, one of 10 children in a small, crowded home where music was the only luxury that didn't cost a thing. His father played the old records Sam Cooke, Otis Redding, Marvin Gaye, and Johnny would hum along, turning pots and pans into drums. By the age of 11, he wasn't just singing, he was performing. The locals called him the boy who sings like a man. Every Sunday, he sang in church, his voice climbing through the rafters like sunlight through stained glass. But during the week, he was fronting a small band with his friends Kinky Fox, playing in smoky bars, barefoot, long before he was old enough to order a drink. Tourists from Miami to Montego Bay would stop, stare, and whisper, "That kid's gonna go far." By the early 82nds, Kinky Fox was one of the most talked-about bands in the Caribbean. 6 nights a week, they filled nightclubs from Nassau to Montreal. Soul music, funk, disco-blending rhythms from the islands with the sound of Black America. Johnny was the spark, charisma, swagger, and a voice that could melt stone. But for him, the Caribbean wasn't enough. He wanted the world. In 1983, clutching a worn-out suitcase and a pocket full of songs, Johnny Kemp boarded a flight to New York City, a place he'd only seen in dreams and on TV. He said goodbye to blue water and palm trees, and hello to concrete and noise. New York was cold, loud, and unkind, but it was alive. Every subway musician, every block party, every voice on every corner reminded him of who he wanted to be. He joined jam sessions in Harlem, sang backup for local artists, slept on couches, and chased every rumor of a record deal. He'd walk through the rain, holding demo tapes in plastic bags, waiting outside record label offices, just hoping someone would listen. And then, finally, someone did. In 1985, Columbia Records signed him part of their brand new urban music division. It was the kind of opportunity he had prayed for since childhood. He released his debut album, Johnny Kemp, produced by the legendary Kashif, who helped shape the sound of Whitney Houston and Evelyn Champagne King. His first single, Just Another Lover, made it onto the Billboard R&B charts, a modest success, but to Johnny, it meant he belonged. Still, something deep inside him was restless. He didn't want to be boxed in as just another R&B singer from the island. He wanted to be what Prince was to Minneapolis, a sound, a movement, a revolution of rhythm. The boy from Nassau had made it to New York, but New York wasn't ready for how big his dream really was. The stage was set, the spotlight warm, and soon, a single song, just one night's inspiration, would turn Johnny Kemp from a name in the credits to the sound of an entire generation getting paid. It was 1988. Wall Street was booming, the hair was high, the sneakers were white, and Friday nights meant something. From Harlem to Houston, from D.C. to Detroit, the air was electric with a brand new sound, New Jack Swing. It was funk, it was R&B, it was hip-hop with a suit and tie. And right at the center of that sound was a voice that made the world move. Johnny Kemp. Just got paid. It's Friday night. Those 8 words hit like a gospel for the working class. It wasn't just a song, it was a celebration. For every black man who punched the clock, for every woman who held it down all week, Johnny's voice said, "You earned this." But the story behind that anthem was almost as wild as the beat itself. The song was originally written for Keith Sweat by a teenage genius named Teddy Riley, the same kid who would later produce for Michael Jackson. But Keith's album had already gone to mastering, so Teddy called his old friend from the neighborhood, the one who'd been grinding for years, chasing one more shot. "Yo, Johnny, you still got that voice?" When Johnny stepped into the studio, something clicked. He sang "Just Got Paid," like a man who had been waiting his entire life for that moment. The phrasing, the attitude, the joy. Teddy said it was like watching a preacher and a party DJ become one. And when it dropped, it was everywhere. Number 1 on the US R&B and dance charts. Top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. MTV. Soul Train. Bet if you turned on a TV in '88, you heard it. Clubs from New York to Miami went up in smoke. Paychecks hit the pockets, and The Weeknd had an anthem. The single sold over 1 million copies, earning Johnny a Grammy nomination alongside Anita Baker and Luther Vandross. He didn't win, but it didn't matter. For that 1 year, he was the king of Friday night. But behind the lights, Johnny wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing freedom. He wanted to prove that a black artist could cross over without losing his soul, that he wasn't just a R&B act. He wanted pop, rock, funk, everything he wanted range. When Columbia Records tried to brand him strictly for the black radio market, he pushed back. He said, "I'm not just a category, I'm a voice." But the system didn't bend. Even as Just Got Paid top charts, the label saw him as a moment, not a movement. No glossy marketing campaign, no nationwide tour, just a few interviews, a music video, and the quiet return to small venues. Still, Johnny smiled through it. He performed like the room was Madison Square Garden, even if it was just 50 people at a downtown lounge. He'd crack a joke, tilt his hat, and tell the band, "Let's give him a Friday," because for him, the music was never about money. It was about motion, about the heartbeat of people who worked, hustled, loved, and hoped. That was Johnny Kemp, the man who sang for joy, even when joy was the only thing he had left. But as the beat faded and the industry began to change, that same joy started slipping away. The fame that once lifted him was slowly turning into the cage that held him. Success came fast, but in the music business, fast money often fades faster. After Just Got Paid turned clubs into churches and Friday nights into holidays, Johnny Kemp should have been unstoppable. But instead of a world tour, he got silence. Instead of creative freedom, he got contracts. Columbia Records, the same label that had promised him the world, now wanted to box him into one sound. R&B only. Black radio. Urban charts. Nothing that might threaten the crossover market. They saw numbers. He saw people. He wanted to make music that connected the islands, the streets, the suburbs, everyone. But the system didn't care about dreams. It cared about demographics. Johnny began to feel the walls closing in. He'd sit in studio sessions staring at lyric sheets, wondering how his own voice had become something to be controlled. He told a friend once, "They don't want me to make music. They want me to repeat a formula." That's when the joy started to fade. He released a few follow-up singles, Birthday Suit and Dancin' With Myself. They charted modestly, but Columbia barely pushed them. The same industry that once smiled at him on Friday night had turned its back by Monday morning. Still, Johnny refused to be bitter. He tried to pivot to create his own lane. He sang for soundtracks, TV commercials, weddings. He became the guy you call when you want the soul of a professional and the humility of a friend. In one of his journal entries, he wrote, "I've sung for millions. I've sung for 50. But when the mic is on, it's all the same. God gave me this voice, and I'll use it." But deep down, the hurt lingered. He watched as others artists he once mentored got the fame, the promotion, the headlines. He'd smile for them, clap for them. But later, alone, he'd replay old tapes, wondering where he went wrong. He had wanted to follow the path of Prince or Terrence Trent D'Arby, artists who broke molds. But the truth was harsh. If you were a black man making joyful music in the late 80s, the industry had already decided your ceiling. Johnny began turning down big offers. He said the business had become too loud, too fake. He poured himself into mentoring young artists, telling them the truth he had to learn the hard way. Keep your publishing. Protect your name. Don't let them own your soul. For years, he lived quietly in New York, performing at private events, keeping his dignity intact. And even though the spotlight had faded, the love never did. Fans would still stop him on the street and hum the words, "Just Got Paid." He'd grin, tip his hat, and say, "That's me, baby." That's the Friday night anthem. But beneath that grin, there was something else. A tiredness that came from fighting to be seen as more than just a one-hit wonder. He was proud of his success, but haunted by what could have been. By the early 2000s, the music world had changed again. Boy bands, teen pop, digital downloads, and Johnny's sound had become a memory. Even when NSYNC remade Just Got Paid in 2000 and sold 10 million copies, Johnny smiled for the cameras. But those close to him said his eyes told a different story. He had given the world a timeless song, but somewhere along the way, the world had taken the song from him. The man who made everyone else feel free was now trapped inside the industry's cage. For years, Johnny Kemp had lived quietly away from the chaos, away from the flashing lights. He was content performing at small shows, weddings, and charity events. The man who once ruled Friday nights was now living like any other working musician, humble, grounded, grateful. But those who knew him said his voice never aged. Even at 55, when he sang Just Got Paid, people still got on their feet. There was magic in that voice, the same joy that once filled dance floors in 1988. Then came the call that would change everything. Teddy Riley, the architect of the new Jack Swing sound, was planning a reunion performance aboard Tom Joyner's Fantastic Voyage cruise, a luxurious floating festival of black excellence. Legends like Earth, Wind and Fire, TLC, Chubb Rock, and R. Kelly were all set to perform. Teddy wanted Johnny to be his surprise guest to sing Just Got Paid one last time for the fans who grew up dancing to it. At first, Johnny hesitated. He told friends he wasn't sure about traveling, that he'd been tired lately. But eventually, he said yes. "All right, man," he texted Teddy. "Let's give them a real Friday night." It was April 2015. Johnny boarded a flight from New York to Montego Bay, Jamaica, smiling, excited, maybe even nostalgic. He checked into his hotel, called home, and texted Teddy again. "See you in a minute, bro. We're gonna have some fun." That was the last message anyone ever received from him. The next morning, the sun rose over the turquoise waters of Montego Bay. Tourists walked the beach, kids played in the sand, and then someone screamed. A man was floating face down in the shallows. When police arrived, they found a fully clothed body and in his pocket, a Bahamian passport that read, Johnny Kemp. He was 55 years old. Word spread quickly. Within hours, fans flooded social media. Rip Johnny Kemp, not the man who sang Friday Night. Even Teddy Riley was in shock. He had expected Johnny to board the cruise that same morning, but the details didn't make sense. According to reports, Johnny had gone to check in for the cruise the day before, but was denied entry. Some said it was a paperwork issue. He didn't have a permanent residence card. Others claimed there was confusion with the cruise manifest. So, he returned to his hotel alone. Later that night, witnesses said they saw him walking along the rocks near the water, quiet, calm. And then, nothing. The next day, his body was found with a head injury. Police ruled it an accident, saying he likely slipped, hit his head, and drowned. They ruled out foul play, but those who loved him weren't convinced. How does a man who swam his whole life fall and drown in shallow water? Why were his belongings, wallet, phone found perfectly dry? Why did the autopsy list natural causes, yet mention trauma to the skull? His wife, Deidre, received the call from the hotel staff. She said she had grown worried Johnny hadn't answered her texts or calls in hours. When she heard the words, "He's gone," the world went silent. At the Fantastic Voyage concert that weekend, Teddy Riley took the stage. The lights dimmed, the crowd roared, and Teddy said, "There was supposed to be another surprise guest tonight. He came all the way to Jamaica to be here. He didn't make it on the ship, but he's with us right now." And then, as the music began, the beat dropped. Just got paid. It's Friday night. Tears filled the room. For a few minutes, it felt like Johnny was there, smiling, dancing, alive again. After his death, the police closed the case quietly. No conspiracy, no investigation, just a tragic accident. But among musicians and fans, the questions never stopped. Some say it was destiny that Johnny gave the world its Friday night and left on one. Others believe there's more to the story, something the ocean still keeps hidden. Either way, when that beat plays and the dance floor lights up, his spirit moves with it. The voice that made the world celebrate was silenced by mystery, but never forgotten. He gave the world a reason to dance. And even in death, Johnny Kemp still gets the world paid. When the beat of Just Got Paid drops, something happens. People smile. Heads nod. shoulders move. Even now, decades later, that rhythm still feels like sunlight breaking through the week's fatigue. Johnny Kemp may have only had one worldwide hit, but he didn't need another. That song wasn't just a record, it was a ritual. It was the sound of release, of joy, of finally exhaling after a long week of struggle. Every generation after him, from New Jack Swing to R&B, from Usher to Bruno Mars, borrows a little of that bounce, that groove, that unapologetic Friday night energy. His voice still echoes through dance floors, through weddings, through backyard barbecues, through any place where people gather to celebrate making it through. He didn't die rich, he didn't die famous, but he died remembered, and that's a kind of wealth that no chart can measure. In his hometown of Nassau, Bahamas, they renamed a street in his honor, Johnny Kemp Street. Children walk past it on their way to school, and maybe one of them will look up one day and ask, "Who was Johnny Kemp?" And someone, maybe a mother, maybe an old DJ, will smile and say, "He's the reason we dance on Fridays." Because that's what legacy truly is. Not the money, not the fame, but the echo that refuses to fade. When the world feels heavy, his song still reminds us that joy is rebellion, that to celebrate, even when life hurts, is a way of surviving. Just got paid. It's Friday night. Maybe, somewhere beyond the noise, Johnny's still singing those words. Hat tilted, smile wide, eyes full of mischief. The club lights flicker. The bass hits. He nods to the crowd and says, "Y'all ready to dance?" Because the truth is, the music never stopped. For Johnny Kemp, Friday never ended.